on straight away though, because we've only got an hour or so, and so pleased to welcome people who are given their time this lunchtime to join us. For those that don't know me, I'm Sue Anstis, and I'm the co-founder of the Women's Sport Collective, along with Kate Hannon, who's up in the corner here and waving. She's always up in that. You're always there, aren't you? Just to my left there, Kate. On my left-hand side there. So yeah, so I'm co-founder of the Women's Sport Collective, and it's an absolute joy today that we're getting to welcome Jenny Meadows for a really exclusive Q&A with us here to answer some questions. And we had a really successful session a month or so ago with Jess Thirlby that's then been recorded and it's been downloaded a lot too. So great to know that we're able to repeat that again with Jenny. So the format is, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to Jenny before we kick off and get started. I do have a few questions that I prepared for Jenny, but I would really love to take your questions. So what I would ask is, as we're talking, to put any questions you have in the chat area beneath, in the chat function, just any questions. And you can also put your hands up. I can also take you off mute to ask questions too. Or if you want to, you can message me in the chat if you want me to ask questions. And then if people see questions they like, this is what worked towards the end with Jess's session. Maybe just put a little thumbs up emoji if there's questions that you'd like to be asked, and I can definitely make sure I get to those ones. So that's kind of the informal format for the day ahead. But yeah, let us know what questions you've got. I've got a few, but I would love to have some of yours too. So delighted to welcome Jenny Meadows to the call today. Jenny's best known for many of us for her brilliant career as a middle distance runner, and she represented Great Britain on the world stage, a huge tally of medals, really known for her sort of grit and that tactical brilliance. I think made her a fan favourite, certainly in our house. We're big fans of athletics in our house, so it was a bit of fangirling me getting to talk to her as I did earlier last month for the Game Changers podcast, but definitely one of the most respected athletes at that time that Jenny was racing, and her impacts continued beyond the track. So she's now coaching, become one of Britain's leading athletics coaches, and coaching a lot of the next generation of stars that we're seeing, including Olympic champion Keely Hodgkinson, but many others besides that as well too, which we can talk about if we have questions. And Jenny's incredible work was really recognised last December when she was named BBC Sports Personality Coach of the Year alongside her husband and coaching partner Trevor Painter. It's a really fitting tribute to that dedication and success. And we're also thrilled that Jenny's a patron of the Women's Sport Collective Coaching Hub too, which is very kind of her to support the work that we're doing there. As I say, a small plug for the Game Changers podcast. We will share a link in the chat here, but there is and I'll try not to ask the same questions that I asked Jenny on the Game Changers, but it was a fantastic episode there too. So if I can start off, Jenny, I'll kick off here. So welcome and thank you. And maybe just to talk a bit about that spotty night and the amazing evening that it was, an incredible night. So how did it feel for you and Trevor to be recognised as coaches on that evening, which is, I guess, an evening about all sport, but how did it feel for you to be recognised in that way?
Oh, it was great. I think most coaches, you never think about yourself. A few people had said to us, particularly journalists, you guys, surely you're going to be shortlisted for Coach of the Year. And honestly, we'd never even thought about that. All our hopes and all our ambitions were, of course, on Keely, trying to win that huge award herself. And Trevor and I had a little bit of a chat saying, do you think we'll be shortlisted? I don't know. But honestly, we did not know until that night when it actually came up on the screen. I think there was maybe 4 coaches who were shortlisted. And it was very much a case of me trying to nudge Trevor, or I don't think I even got my elbow out to nudge him. I think I just did a little sound as if, oh my goodness, we've been nominated. And you're so aware, of course, of cameras on you, and you don't want to say the wrong thing or look a certain way, and straight away you think, if we get it, what do I do? If we don't win the award, do we look disappointed, etc.? But actually for me, I was more worried about Trevor, because he hates anything like that. He just can't take praise. So I was more thinking, oh, Trevor, don't pass out or anything like that. I did hear a real change of his breath when they announced our name, and he shoved me on the stage first and tried to get me to say something first. But for me, I've only been coaching, and it's been my whole life, for probably 2 years. So I must admit, I felt like a little bit of a fraud, because Trevor's done it for 20 years. And, he set the whole coaching situation up, etc. I think for me, it was more of a recognition of my 30 years in the sport, 30 odd years, 35 years, I'm probably going to say, in the sport, from being an athlete to mentoring to now coaching. It was just, I wasn't good enough to win that, coveted award myself like Keely did. But it was just, for me, it was just a recognition of my whole 360 degrees journey, and really just really important for our family, because families, as everybody on this call will know, are so, so important in everybody's careers. They've made sacrifices, from airport journeys and all sorts of things over the years. So it was just really special for our family, for us to be recognized, really.
And do you think coaches generally get a significant recognition in terms of, we had a tiny bit of that conversation actually before we came on here, didn't we, in terms of the recognition of the people behind the athletes?
No, I don't, for sure. And that's one of the reasons why I was absolutely thrilled to, when you asked me to be one of the ambassadors for the coaching hub. I think particularly females as well, which is obviously another step that we're working to. But it is all based on the athletes, and even national governing bodies, all the support is for the athlete, which is fine. But of course, it is about coaching. And if you think about the impact that a coach can have, an athlete's career is relatively short, but a coach can be around for 3 or 4 or 5 generations of athletes. So I think the investment into coaches does have to improve. I think it's very tricky, and if anybody knew the answer, we would have solved that problem. But I definitely think recognition, and accolades do give you a pat on the back, and probably that boost, think, oh, you know what, someone recognizes this, I can keep going for another 12 months.
Is it different across different sports too? And I guess I tend to think about the amount that football managers are paid, and you look across at the US, some of the WNBA coaches and NBA coaches and so on. Do you think track and field athletics is very different to other sports, or do we see that in many sports in the UK?
Yeah, I do. I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Sue. The amount of, I would probably say, coaches, grassroots coaches, voluntary coaches. It was the British Indoor Championships, probably a couple of months after Trevor and I had won that prize at Spotty, and the amount of coaches, officials, people who do it voluntary or for very, very little money, have actually said they were so thrilled that athletics coaches were recognized in that way, and they never thought athletics coaches could possibly be recognized, ahead of, like you say, those people from other sports who are in professional sports, they're in teams, they've applied for a job, it's been there, and they've been a successful candidate. Whereas track and field, it's very much, it starts at the grassroots, you have to build that up yourself, and it's voluntary until you get to a certain level. And Trevor, for example, he produced Keely's first Olympic medal from being a volunteer. And, we do call ourselves professional coaches now, but obviously we cannot compete and expect to get any sort of money that people from other sports do. And I think we are a unique situation where we've actually, reached out to sponsors, and that's only because we've already got Olympic medalists in our camp. So I think it's really done a lot of people the power of good to believe that they can make it and they can get recognition in our sport. So I think that's absolutely tremendous. If us winning that award has give other people faith, that's absolutely brilliant.
And in terms, you mentioned female athletes there. So female athletes, female coaches there. So what's your experience been like in athletics itself? So when you're attending coaching meetings and championships, um, how represented are women kind of right now? And has that changed from when you were an athlete to today at all?
No, it's not changed at all, unfortunately. So when I was a younger athlete, I've always actually been coached by males. I've never been coached by a female coach, and you do see at grassroots level there are quite a few females. I think coaching is definitely does lend itself to a lot of traits that females can bring. And I've got to say, Trevor, I'm using him as an example here because he's the closest example I've got, and he won't mind whatever I say about him. So I've got a free license to do that. Trevor is very, very good at coaching males, obviously, and females. But I think a lot of females do come with a certain skill set. So, stereotypically, you can think about a lot of males who's not quite, got that understanding of certain things that females have to face, probably menstrual cycle being the biggest one. And Trevor's great. He's a great advocate. He coached me, he's lived with me, he understands that, and he's brilliant. But I think there's definitely some males in coaching situations who just wouldn't be comfortable with that. And that's just because they've not been educated and they've not had the support. So I have always, like I say, been around a very male dominated environment. But when I was younger, I would see lots of age group athletes being coached by females. And then I've had conversations with female coaches, and they have very much said, oh, I've got this talented athlete. At some point, I know I'm going to have to let that athlete move on to a better coach. And each time I've kind of said, no, you're doing a wonderful job. Why would you do that? You have to back yourself. If you're not prepared to back yourself and do something for females and prove it, then we're just always going to be in this situation. But certainly when I go to major championships, I went to the Olympic Games with Ireland, Team Ireland, because we've got an Irish athlete, and Trevor obviously went with Team GB. There's very small percentage of females who are in those coaching roles at that top level. And I'm a real advocate now to think we just have to change that. I really believe, and I'm told by our athletes that they think it's a great mix of, having Trevor as a coach, having me involved in the coaching role now, and you kind of have that family and that honesty and that transparency. And sometimes it's a personal thing. One of the athletes might naturally gravitate to Trevor rather than me, and vice versa. So no, I think the 35 years that I've been involved in the sport, certainly athletics in the UK, there's a very small amount of female coaches, and it makes more sense that there probably is a better diversity in America, because in America, obviously, they have the collegiate system and they have men's teams and women's teams, and quite often more females are involved because they generally do coach the female team. So I think if America can do it, I don't see why we can't. But I guess our system is different, that it's just almost grassroots transition, and obviously senior athletes, we don't have that great collegiate system and the bigger base that the US would have.
And you mentioned there a little bit about, I guess, that balance of gender, talking around menstrual cycles for female athletes. And I was going to ask you, obviously, we're seeing a lot more discussion now around RED-S, disordered eating in athletes, athletes making weight, and so on. And I had a question actually that came through before this from Sarah Mall, who wanted to know, in terms of your coaching, and whether that reproductive health of your athletes is something you consider now when you're planning training and competition. If it's something that you discuss, I'm sure you discuss openly with your athletes, but is it being discussed openly with athletes now, more so than perhaps when you were an athlete?
Yeah, certainly. I think the whole landscape has completely changed. I only retired 9 years ago, but when I look at it, what is available, nutrition, information and advice is so much more advanced. The same with RED-S. We would see it, but I think people just didn't know enough about it. And there's been that definitely that change of, some people have chose to talk about weight, other people are scared to talk about weight, etc. And I think it's just been really, really tricky. And if you think about, especially in coaching, where it does relatively rely on people being, volunteers, having a job, especially in track and field, having a job, having a family, and you're a voluntary coach, having the time to upskill, talking to a lot of experts in things, again, it's just an extra add-on to the actual time that you spend planning, preparing, actually delivering sessions. So that's why I think a lot of people have tried to, stay away from it, and they just don't know what the right thing is to say. But it's absolutely brilliant now, and I'm finding that athletes are coming to us and they're actually saying, hey, I've got a little bit of an issue. Or social media, it's great for some things and not for others, but even just seeing things out there that people know they can ask questions. And one of the biggest things that I always say is, saying that you don't know something or not having an answer is not a bad thing. My philosophy is to be really, really honest. So if an athlete came to me with a certain situation and I wasn't sure, I say, you know what, I'm a little bit aware of that. I personally didn't really have that issue in my career, but I'm aware that other people have. But what I will do to you is, I'll come back to you in 24, 48 hours. I'll go away. I'll go and find somebody who can give me that answer, and we'll work through it. And I always just find, coaching, it's a huge responsibility. You can't possibly know all the answers, but there's so much more information out there now. There's so many people that you can get hold of to know things like that. And I'm just thinking it's absolutely brilliant that athletes are asking those questions and they're not afraid. There's just been so many barriers that have been broken down, like I say, since when I finished my career to now. And I just think it can only be better for athletes, coaches, parents, everybody. And not just the results, but I also think the whole journey and enjoying things a lot more. So I think it is making huge progress almost on a 12 monthly basis now.
And it's good to see, isn't it? It's good to see. We did talk on the podcast about the kind of toll, the emotional toll of being denied medals by athletes that were later banned for doping, and kind of your experience of that, how it impacted your decision to ultimately step away from a sport. So, how are things for your athletes today? I'm going to interested to know, as a coach, how you are supporting that kind of next generation of athletes to get them to hold on to integrity, even when the system might not feel fair for them. How does that work for you as on a coaching side?
Yeah, it's something that I think all of the athletes in my training group are aware of. And actually it's so nice. I've had a few examples of when one of our athletes goes and, does a great performance, etc. They definitely come to me and say, oh, Jenny, like, it's so good that you've not got, any kind of jealousy or ego, and you're supporting me because this could have been you, or it should have been you. And I firstly, I just love that. It's a bit like when you get an award and someone gives you that acknowledgement. I love the emotional intelligence that some athletes have to say that to me. They don't need to, but I've just found that, like, is a huge new level of appreciation and respect that I've got for them to be able to say that. One of my biggest beliefs of coaching is that clean athletes can win, but you've got to be really prepared to work hard. And work ethic is a huge value of mine. So I know I always try to be kind of two steps ahead of all of our athletes. So an easy thing that I do every single day is I've literally just got a list of all the athletes. And either before I go to bed, or it could be the first thing when I wake up in the morning, I just go through every single athlete and I just try to spend like 2 minutes putting myself in their shoes. Like, okay, what have they got going on this week? Okay, they've got a race next week. Okay, what is their form like, etc. And is there any issues they've got in their life at the moment? So always keeping two steps ahead, I think, will allow me to make really, really good decisions, because I do see this as a massive responsibility, because people are choosing to put their careers in mine and Trevor's hands. It's absolutely huge. And I think one of the things as an athlete that most people respected is whenever I got on the start line, they knew I was going to run with my heart on my sleeve. You know, I wasn't going to, I've never not tried and given it my all. I've never not give my all in a training session. And just basically by me as a coach leaving no stone unturned and working so hard for them, quite often I might just send them a little WhatsApp. Have you thought about this? Just want to let you know that I'm thinking about this, etc. I think I obviously have earned their respect. So they come really on a daily basis, also just giving their all and just giving their work ethic to me. And that's all anybody can ask for, because I think I would maybe feel, I don't want to say resentful, but I think I would find it really hard if I was putting all my effort into something and there were some things that the athletes weren't doing. And that is only because we're obviously working with some really high performing athletes. It is all about fun, it is about the journey and enjoying it. And but ultimately we talk in a high performance environment language, and you know we have to do, because that's the reason we're all there. You know, they're trying to go to championships, they're trying to win medals, they're trying to break records. We want to enjoy the journey, but we're all there for a common agreed purpose. So I think that certainly helps. But I think environment's huge, and we've got a really good environment where we can see every single person putting their effort on in every single day. And just an example again, I'm using Keely because most people on this call would obviously know Keely. At the weekend, we had a great junior athlete running an incredible time, and we've got a little WhatsApp group. And for Keely to be, you know, thumbs up, oh, that's amazing. And I think she sent an emoji of some flames or something, you know, for that young athlete to see the Olympic champion, you know, backing them and working hard and being inspired by her. I think that's absolutely huge. So, yeah, there's just a common understanding and a common purpose that you can reach the very top in this sport, and you can do it cleanly. There's so many good examples of that in our training group. And if somebody doesn't, you know, fulfill that purpose, and if somebody's very, very different in the group, it probably wouldn't work. So that inspires me every day, and I'm sure it inspires all the athletes as well.
And I was just going to say on communications, it's interesting, isn't it, when you said about that, looking at your list of athletes and so on. How is technology and WhatsApp and how do you communicate with athletes? I was thinking, as a long time ago, I was an athlete, never at your level, obviously, but almost like meeting your coach down the track when you see them. But now, well, the world's changed, hasn't it, in terms of how they can communicate with you and you communicate with them. So what tools do you use? How many
Yeah,
athletes?
it's so different. You know, Trevor used to get frustrated. He always would have so much respect for his coach, and you know, it was the old fashioned, if you had a question that couldn't wait till you were at training at the track, you know, he'd be really nervous about even calling him. And you know, he'd call him and say, "Oh, I'm really sorry to bother you. Is this a good time?" etc. But we are working with a different generation. There's a different level of expectation. And it's difficult for a coach because you are available 24/7. And I think because mine and Trevor's personality, we're very we're pleasers, we're people pleasers. So it's almost like it's not a job. We are available because all the time, because we know it might be a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening, or it might be late at night. You know, some of the WhatsApp messages we get at 20 past 11, and I'm thinking, do I reply to this now? But they've sent a message and they need something. And we do. We just make ourselves available the whole time. But then obviously there is a level of when Trevor and I have to look after our own mental health and our own energy as well. So we try to put rules in place, but we're the worst people for breaking those rules and just replying as well. So yeah, I think our athletes would think that we're available all the time. And again, I guess it comes down to work ethic and leaving no stone unturned. So if an athlete is struggling with something on a Sunday evening and they just feel, you know, the need to have sent us a WhatsApp, maybe to get something off their head, you know, we do. We know that, and we reply to them. For example, we do coach 6 days a week. So on a Sunday, that is supposed to be our rest day, but obviously there's issues that crop up even on a Sunday, and there's training camps which are, you know, months long, and obviously we've got races that can happen on a Sunday. So we kind of save a Sunday to work less, let's say. And it is that our best athletes probably do respect that a little bit more. And there is thought, for example, we've got a 4-year-old, so someone might think, oh, well, I didn't bother you last night because I know it was probably bath time and bedtime for Arabella, which is really good. But a lot of people don't have boundaries, and like I say, we bring our boundaries down just because we think it does help our athletes. But I do think it's a brilliant time to kind of to coach and to be able to communicate, because you can send something and almost no stone is left unturned again. You know, some athletes might just send us a quick WhatsApp and just say, not for you to reply now, but I just want to let you know. They might send us a quick screenshot of a run that they've done on Strava, or download sometimes from, you know, their watch, just so you guys have got this data. And again, it does allow us to compile so much data, to, you know, compile it to a system that we've got ourselves, and just allows us just to know so much about athletes, which again, I only retired 9 years ago, but I definitely wouldn't have communicated as much information as that.
I've got two more questions here. So, Sarah, do you want to ask your question first, actually?
Yeah, happy to. Hi, Jenny. You're right.
Yes, I'm good. Thanks, Sarah.
Nice to see you again. This is around coaches, grassroots coaches, although it does go up to the top. Parents, dads particularly, and other male coaches can make life hell for female grassroots coaches. I just wondered what you would recommend that we could be doing at the macro level, at governing bodies level, and also any strategies that grassroots female coaches could employ to dissipate it, overcome it, deal with it.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely a problem that I think Trevor and I have definitely experienced. Um, we actually have been coaching, or certainly Trevor, for a long time, and he still has a parents WhatsApp group that has been set up, and he set that up originally to try to, I don't want to use the word control, but he set that up so you can give parents information, because obviously people are on the sidelines and they don't know what the objective is, what the plan is, what the strategy is. A lot of people could make assumptions, and they could be wrong ones. So that WhatsApp group was set up to put information on there, and you know, if a certain session went a certain way, this data and the statistics would be there. Now, actually, interesting, because of GDPR, we now don't put data and statistics of people's training. So now we just send it to the athletes and say, if your parents are interested in this, can you now pass it on to them? But we still use that group to give certain pieces of information. And we've just found, by, again, being 2 steps ahead of even parents as well as athletes, it has definitely kind of stopped us from firefighting, we would say, a few issues, and just trying to take people along on the journey with us has definitely helped us do that. I think if anybody had the answer to that, Sarah, it would solve a lot of people's problems. But I just think honesty, transparency, good communication, which obviously does take longer, and just that theme of being 2 steps ahead has worked for us. And I think we'll continue to do that.
Thanks, Sarah. Irene had a question around the M11 Track Club. So I don't know if you just tell us a bit about how many athletes you've got and what it is. But Irene's question is around how you approach attracting and retaining sponsors. I guess it's sponsors for the club rather than sponsors for
Yeah.
you. little bit more about this kind of setup there would be useful.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I'm very much a person who is all or nothing. So, and I've actually got a huge ego, which I didn't realize I had, but I'm really proud if I put my name to anything. So I think I said this on the podcast, Sue. Coaching is definitely not something that I wanted to do. So it's 9 years since I've retired. It's 2 years since I've actually been able to say the words, I'm a coach, without kind of looking sideways and someone, saying, are you really? Even though I did do my coaching awards in athletics, we've got level 1, 2, and 3. I probably started them 20 years ago and probably finished my level 3 maybe 15 years ago. Been to university, got qualifications, and all of those sorts of things. But I think as a female, I definitely thought, well, Trevor's the coach and it's his baby and he's done this for 20 years. But I was just really glad that Trevor was like, no, Jen, actually, we really need you. I've got some really good athletes here and you've been mentoring some of them or taking on little side projects for me. But actually, for you to be here with me, our group's really advancing. And this week, for example, I'm going to the Rome Diamond League. Trevor's coaching the group at home, and next week I'm off to Stockholm, the week after Paris. So it does take two of us to do all of that. So yeah, I actually just said to Trevor, look, we need a name. Like, it can't just be Trev and Jen's group, and there's a lot of things that we would like to do. And again, it's that question, isn't it? It's an NGB cannot give you everything. So we've got 3 Olympic medalists in our training group. Sarah Healy from Ireland, European indoor champion. We've got a lot of people. There's things that we need, support services, physios, physiologists. There's a lot of skill sets that me and Trevor have not got. We have people we can reach out to, but we've not actually got them in our team on a regular day-to-day basis. So we decided to give ourselves a name. And it was actually Keely's dad who came up with M11, which is the postcode of Sport City, where we're based. And he came up with a logo of the worker bee, which is, a lot of people in Manchester, they say they're as busy as bees. And that really fits in with our work ethic. So we came almost a year ago as M11 Track Club, set ourselves up as Instagram, and just got ourselves a little account. And straight away, that just really gave me kind of I don't want to say the power, but almost the belief to say, hey, look, this is who we are. We've put something together. We put a handbook together and sent it to our all athletes. And again, you can't presume stuff, but we just wanted to check that they knew what journey we're on. So our North Star is we're here for high performance. We expect to win medals, break records, and this is what we're about. And then that just allowed me, I have got a background, a master's degree in sports marketing. So I reached out to a few companies who I felt had the same values as us, and just didn't want to reach out for too many people. So we've got a couple of sponsors now. So they are able to pay for those services, like I say, some travel to competition, some physio for the athletes. We've just got a job that we're about to appoint someone as a physiologist. And one of the reasons we wanted the physiologist is we don't want them to change our philosophy. We're doing pretty well already with the success that we're having. But one of them was exactly because of I wanted to check for, certain athletes have got different things. So Trevor and I could set a training session that day, and that training session might hit home with 5 out of the 10 athletes. But how do we get that training session to be bespoke enough for all 10? Especially things if an athlete's come back from an injury, or if they've been going through jet lag, or it's a certain athlete's time of the month. Is there a better time to plot that certain training session for that athlete? So it really is just looking for that fine detail now. And Trevor and I also recognizing that we don't have all the answers to every single question. So I think setting ourselves up as a company and just having the the bravery to really back what we're doing and get a couple of sponsors has been absolutely huge for us.
It's interesting. I'm reflecting on your humility and how humble you are when you opened up and said, actually, Trevor's been doing this 20 years and I've only done it. Because actually, I remember, I was thinking, well, no, actually, when we spoke, you did your level 3 like 15 years, like years and years ago. And actually, when I spoke to Mel Marshall on the Game Changers, she talked about the fact that you haven't been in the pool for 20 years, haven't been an athlete, you've been there at the very heart of it, being coached and training and so on as well too. So it's interesting, isn't it? Is that whole I guess that humility of not thinking is that confidence in yourself something that you've experienced historically as an athlete and as a coach now? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I think as an athlete, I never just presumed I was the most talented. Again, I worked hard and I just really appreciate everyone who I had in my career, from coaches, from physios, from everyone who helped me do that. And then again, I guess the worst thing that you can do when you've been an athlete is to then step in that coach role and think, well, everything that worked for me is going to work for everybody else, because everyone is very, very unique. And we're always looking for new ways to do things, and always, checking that we've not missed anything. I know Trevor himself as a coach has evolved even from my career. So I did the same event as Keely, for example. She will still do some training sessions that I did, but Trevor has evolved as a coach. There's more information out there, and his philosophy is the same, but he's changed some of those things for sure. I think I think it may be, from being a female. I do hate to say it, but I do think sometimes we do have kind of that, yeah, you think, oh, I'm not quite good enough to do this, or I have to prove myself a little bit more in able to, to claim that I'm this person, etc. But like I say, my philosophy is always just to be humble and really honest, and just to have an open mindset. I think those people with a fixed mindset who think they're going to change the world and they're going to do it really, really quickly, and you guys need to do what I did and it's going to have the same results, is really, really short-sighted. So yeah, maybe I should remember what I have done previously. And it is almost like the athletes do say to me, Jenny, you're so important to us. Don't think you're not important. Trevor might have his name as our main coach next to our names, but it is very much, a joint thing. And it's just so nice listening from the athletes. I know Georgia Hunter-Bell was on a podcast recently, and I didn't know she was on it, and I just saw a snippet on social media, and she was just talking about how important it is to have that duo, and male and a female. It just really highlights that there's, a double purpose here, and together we're stronger. So, and like I say, Trevor's been really good to not say, oh yeah, I'm the coach, Jen's the assistant, etc. He's brought me along on the journey with him. And yeah, I'm really grateful that I'm doing this. If someone told me 2 years ago, I would give up my commentating that I'd been, getting used to doing over the last couple of years, I was throwing myself into this wholeheartedly, I would never believe it. But I think it's because I do actually think I've found the thing that I'm supposed to do, and I've had really good feedback and some lovely people, not just, obviously they're in my life because they're athletes, but I know the athletes are good people, and I know this relationship with them isn't just transactional. It's going to carry on for years, when they've finished athletics, whatever they're doing in life. I just know we work with some great people, and that just keeps me really, really happy on a daily basis.
Got a lovely, thank you. A lovely couple of questions here from Amelia and also from Ellie around advice to younger female coaches. So Amelia's asking about women that are starting out, new in that coaching journey, any advice there? And then Ellie asked about any advice for younger female coaches wanting to step up from grassroots to more of that performance senior coaching. So what advice would you share for those young females coming through?
Brilliant. Amelia, I've got to apologise. Amelia and I are supposed to have an online meeting at some point. Amelia reached out to me, and I'm really glad that she did. So Amelia Campbell, everyone, has been a Great Britain athlete, women's shot put for, I'm going to say a decade. It might be longer than that, Amelia, but been to lots of major championships. And Amelia, we really need you, because particularly in the women's throws events, it's very, very poor. I'm literally thinking in my head, I think I can think of two, and forgive me if there's more than that, but I think I can think of two females in that elite coaching space in Great Britain, which we've got so many athletes, such a good pool of athletes, but just not enough women in that space. So I absolutely love it that Amelia is going to get involved in that. And I will go into more detail, Amelia, but hopefully you've learned really from what I've said about how we've had to set ourselves up professionally to do that, because I think a lot of people, want to get into coaching, but they do find it really, really hard because there's not that much information out there post doing those coaching courses. So, okay, what do I do now? How do I, tell people I'm there? I can go to a certain club, but then you're really reliant on the talent pool from that club. And how do you get it out there that you want to you want to do more, that you've got these ambitions to do it? So I guess that's where social media comes out, and that's really, really important, and something that I didn't really have to try to do myself, because I already went into an established coaching setup, and Trevor was really great, like I say, to embrace me, to work alongside him. So I guess the options, for both the women who's just asked those questions are, do you set yourselves up separately in your own entity, or do you join forces with someone who's already there and saying, together we can be better? Can you bring me along on that journey? Again, I'm just talking for the sport of athletics, because I'm not sure about the pathways for other sports, but I presume they're probably similar. I think definitely, volunteering your time in a lot of kind of age group development opportunities is really, really important. So if I look back to Trevor, he definitely got involved with things like the UK School Games, and he got involved in lots of regional camps and talent days, and, just really worked his way up. Amelia, for you, I would definitely say to reach out to someone at UKA and try to get on those age group team championships. So there's the under 18s and these under 20s and under 23 championships. And, you're good enough to go on those as a team coach, because you've experienced what the athletes will be experiencing. And that is something that I had done previously to coaching. Straight away the last 2 years, I'd been to several European under 18 and under 20 and under 23 championships, and just give up 5 days or a week of my time every year and gone to those championships. And a lot of the coaches may not have competed at that level, so what the athletes are about to experience. How isolated you can feel sometimes, how nervous you can feel, and just having those really honest and open conversations with athletes of, I've been there, I've been in your position, I know exactly how you're feeling. That cannot be underestimated, and to have that connection with those athletes is really, really good. And then you're bringing something different to that support team at that major championships. You're having some young athletes who are prepared to open up, and you might help them perform that little bit better, or just enjoy that competition a little bit better. And then post that championships, again, reaching out to coach and athlete with reflections. Did you meet the objectives of your competition? If not, what were your learnings? And just really trying to build that, that communication between athlete and coach, almost as a mentor coach. That is what I did for a number of years. And so I kind of stepped into those situations, but I didn't do it on a full-time basis. But that really allowed me to grow, realize how important my experiences had been, and then obviously have helped me going into that role as a coach full time. And again, I guess as part of the second question, which still relates to what you're saying, Amelia, I think the same, from grassroots is exactly the same. again, reaching out to county, reaching out to regional teams and opportunities just to upskill and, just put a little bit of time to work with people, observe things, and just come in almost like as a second pair of eyes sometimes and just gain those experiences. There's actually a female coach at the moment who had huge success with a young athlete, Phoebe Gill. So Phoebe went to the Olympic Games at 17 last year in the 800 meters, which is absolutely incredible. And a shout out to her coach, Deborah Steer. She has got Phoebe to a brilliant standard. But I first came across Deborah in 2014, and she came on the England pathway, and they give her an opportunity because she'd been producing some good young athletes, and she came into the England pathway as a support coach. And I remember her being at a championship with me. And then roll on 10 years, I spoke to Deborah in Paris, and she said, "Oh, I don't know if you'll remember me." And it was a really nice moment where I said, "No, Deborah, I do. You came on." And she's like, "Yeah, that moment 10 years ago, I've had a 10-year build up. I never had an athlete that I thought I was ever going to take to an Olympic Games. But 10 years on, I'm really glad I got that opportunity, because now I'm ready to do that, and I'm really confident in everything that I'm doing." So yeah, it takes time, but I think just be brave and just make that phone call, have that conversation, send that email, because there's definitely been a lot of moments in my career where I've wrote an email, thought about sending it, slept on it overnight, then I've just pressed the button and I've just thought, I've done it now, and I've been brave. And each time I'm really glad I've reached out to somebody, because the answer has never been no.
Yeah, and I guess what's the worst thing is that the answer might be no, but that's you won't know unless you ask the question, will you? Thank you for
Absolutely.
that. I've got a couple of questions here around sort of psychology. So Sarah asks what your thoughts are around having sports psychologists as part of the built-in coaching team rather than the coach taking lots of that on. And another question from Aya about what you think about including brain training and mental support in training as well as the physical side. So how much is that a part of what you're doing?
Yeah, brilliant. I definitely needed to, as an athlete, to improve my mental skills. I reached the top of my sport probably quite late in my career, and I think I was definitely physically capable younger in my career. But again, it was Trevor who noticed there was something that I probably needed to do. And as a coach, he just bought into that and thought that, again, that's not a skill set that he had. So I did work with a brilliant sports psychologist, and straight away, she made my journey fun. She made me understand how the brain works, and also was brilliant with Trevor. There was probably a few little things that Trevor was doing that were quite unhelpful and triggered me, and that was no fault of his own. He would just say a few little things, and I would interpret them a little bit different from his intention. So Trevor and I definitely speak the same language, and we're on the same page, and we have always just integrated that into our coaching philosophy. And then we have definitely suggested to a few athletes over the years of working with somebody themselves independently on their sports psychology, management. I know a lot of people think, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. Why do I need to do that?" But, we just call it, psychological skills. And I think it's very unusual for people who are not at the top of sport to have that practitioner in their lives. Sometimes it's a constant thing, or sometimes it's just a situational thing. And what Trevor and I generally tend to do is, if we're introducing an athlete to a sports psychologist, we know everybody works differently. So some people like to be really direct, and we therefore think, "Oh, this is the person for them." Obviously, it's got to be very personal for them. Someone who worked for me might not work for somebody else in the same way, or others are not ready to be that direct and they want a slower approach and a more holistic approach. So yeah, we're huge advocates of making sure our athletes are well equipped psychologically for training and performance. And again, what we will try to do is that initial conversation, we will go to that meeting or join online and make sure it's a really safe space. And then just let the athlete go away and work with sports psychologists. It's always obviously confidential, but then if there's any issues that we need to be made aware of, collectively, that practitioner and the athlete might want to just make us aware of that, which can only aid our success, for sure. If we know the whole picture, what to say, what not to say, what to avoid, what to bring up, just knowing how an athlete works and how they tick is really, really, really crucial. And I know for sure the brain is the most powerful muscle in the whole of the body. So yeah, we're huge advocates for, we've had a couple of athletes who's had mental health issues, and again, we always take things personally with, well, have we missed that, or is it something that we're not doing right for that athlete? But I think just being open and being transparent and saying to our athletes, okay, how do you want us to be with you? How do you prefer us to be? For me, something that I realized recently is if I've got an issue and somebody says to me, how are you? I'm probably someone who could get really emotional if somebody asks me how I am, if I'm not in a good place. So I would prefer someone not to ask me how I am. I prefer, to avoid it. But one of our athletes recently said, no, I need you guys to ask me how I am, because you can't presume that somebody else has asked me how I am. It might be that no one has asked me. So can you at least give me the option to be able to say, how I'm feeling to you guys? So always learning. And we just think it's so, so powerful. And I don't think you can be a coach without having that full understanding of how an athlete is, psychologically, and if they're happy, as well as performance. And it's such a tricky balance. I've said we're all about high performance, but it's got to be fun. You've got to enjoy the journey. But ultimately, we want our athletes to be happy, because if they're not happy and it's just very transactional, they're not going to get the best out of themselves anyway.
We've got about another 5 minutes or so. A couple more quick questions. I was going to ask a couple of questions around motherhood. I know we did talk about that a bit on the podcast too, but someone's asked, obviously, how you're managing to balance that working at such an elite level when you've got a parenting a 4-year-old as well, and the demands as
Yeah.
that's formal schooling and so on. And someone asked, obviously, we hear a lot about women dropping out of coaching because of that family demand. So how are you coping with that now, and it's almost like gendered question, obviously that's for you and Trevor as parents, but tends to fall more generally on the female. So how do you look ahead and feel you're going to deal with that moving forwards too?
Yeah, I'm always so honest. It's hard work. It really is. And I think, because mine and Trevor's jobs are 24/7, it is really, really tough. And there's definitely, yeah, people will ask me the question, because like you say, gender stereotypical rather than Trevor. I've spoke to Trevor about this a lot, and I think the female brain is so different to the male brain. I'm not a worrier. I don't have any anxiety, but my brain has definitely changed since I've been a mum. And I do worry about things way more, where Trevor's approach is, well, let's worry about that when it happens. It might never happen, but I'm always forward thinking. So yeah, our biggest thing is probably two things. Um, I have this really unique situation where I remember a young girl coming to the track all the time because her parents were coaches. And I always used to think, that poor child is at the track again. And actually, I think she was having a whale of a time. But I used to think, this poor child is at the track. So I've always tried not to have Arabella at the track very much. When she comes now, she feels like it's such a treat. So she probably comes once a month. But yeah, we do have 5 training camps a year, and Arabella comes on 2 of them. But she generally thinks she's going on holiday with the athletes, which is amazing. And if we ever take a holiday ourselves as a family, she wonders where the athletes are. So it's so wonderful that she just sees it as a holiday, because she is in the pool, she has a great time, and she has some absolutely unbelievable role models. So I look how she is, and she is thriving. She would say so many things about, you know, Mummy, I rang her a couple of weeks ago when I was on a training camp without her, and that was my first solo training camp without Trevor. So I led it myself and obviously left her at home. And I actually said to her, because actually there was no emotion. I wanted her to tell me she was actually missing me. And she just said, Mummy, you can do this. The show has got to go on. And I literally thought, oh my goodness, I've got this cold-hearted child. If she told me she was missing me, I'd probably have cried. So you've got to be careful what you wish for. But no, she's so resilient and she just accepts it, which is absolutely great. And I think she's really advanced emotionally because of those situations she's had, which is great. But you definitely still get mum guilt. And the World Championships are in September, and we've already worked it out. Trevor will go first to the holding camp, and I will be there for Arabella's first day at school. So she's starting school in reception in September. So I will be there for a first day, but then a second day, I'll be then away for 2.5 weeks. And it's one of those things, it's a social media thing. I feel like I'd get judged on Facebook if I was not there on her first day at school. But that is just the way it's worked. I will be there for one day. I kind of wish I was there for 2 days or 3 days, but I've got no problems in my head. She's just going to walk in there, breeze it, and she'll be absolutely great. And I know during nursery, different transitions we've had, the teachers have kind of said, oh, I wonder how she'll cope with this. And I've not worried about anything. She's just gone in, changed nurseries, coped with transitions. She's been away for a month on training camp with us, or the holiday with the athletes, gone straight back to nursery like she was there yesterday. So she's definitely a more resilient and developed human being than what I was at that age. And I just hope that we're giving her a great start in life. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of opportunities where I think I'm probably not doing things right, but that's all you can do as a parent. And I speak to a lot of other parents, and they say it's just great that we're giving her those opportunities. But yeah, it's hard. I don't
Life,
sleep
isn't
as
it?
much as I wish I did. I don't have as much downtime as I wish I did. But she's really happy. Our athletes are thriving, and every so often Trevor and I win an award, and it keeps us going.
Love that. I love that. I've got one more super quick question I'm going to squeeze in here from Laura Hipman Sparks, which I would ask you to ask it, Laura, but I'm going to ask very quickly. What advice do you have for parents supporting girls in their early teens who are ambitious young athletes to very strike that right balance?
It's all about balance, Laura. Hi, Laura. Yeah, all about balance. We are real advocates of a dual career. So Trevor and I always say, as much as you want to be a professional athlete, we always know injuries happen, things don't happen at the right time, finance is important as well. So dual career really helps take the pressure off us as well. And I think it obviously helps really grounded athletes. And I think meeting deadlines, getting assignments in, all of that sort of stuff is really, really similar to athletics, preparing for races, getting your training in, trying to race on a given deadline, given day. I think it really lends itself great. Yes, we've experienced that with so many athletes. Keely, for example, did give up the sport before she was in our training group around about age 13 and 14. And, it's just about concentrating on yourself. I think it's hard being a female, and I think it's hard being a sports person, because both of those are comparative by nature, but it's all about your own journey. And we just try to explain so many different case studies, how people have done it different ways. There's no right, there's no wrong, but it's just about bringing parents along for that journey, us mentoring them, giving them the right people in their lives, and just hopefully, yeah, just striking that nice balance.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. As with all these things, we could go on, but I'd like to finish promptly where I can at 2. Jenny, thank you so much. It's
It's a
lovely.
pleasure.
We always get a flurry of questions at the end. I need to get people to get the questions in a bit earlier because we always come towards the end of a session. But thank you so much for your openness and honesty and all the time and support you're providing. And thank you to everyone that joined the call and for questions and just being a part of it all. And yeah, good luck for the rest of the summer and the World Championships and everything else that's happening in life. and family. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, and to all the amazing women who've obviously come on screen because you're involved in coaching or definitely empowering women's sport. So thank you to all of you, whatever way, shape and form you're doing this. We can only do it together collectively. So yeah, thank you so much, and let's keep doing this.
Lovely. I love that. We might use that as a little strap line there. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thanks
Thank you.
all. Have a good rest of the
Bye.
day.
Thank you.